are listening to the Cycling Podcast in association with Rafa, celebrating the sport and producing the fun. Today, we're in Angers.
Hello, my name's Richard Moore. I'm with Lionel Birnie.
Hello, Richard.
And Andy Hood from VeloNews.
Hello, fellas.
That was a great introduction there, Andy, wasn't it? And why did we hear that blast of music?
Today is the day of independence. You know, we had our Brexit like 200 years ago from you guys. Independence Day.
You guys are so far ahead of us.
You're enjoying this, aren't you?
Indeed, we are.
The whole world's enjoying this.
I was saying, though, that a year from now, the US, we might be looking at the US and not feeling quite stupid as we do at the moment.
Perhaps not. We were hoping to see.
Your election.
We were hoping to see an American. Well, we have Trump coming down the pipe in November, but we were hoping today to see one of the American boys out in the attack, but it just didn't happen.
There was very nobody out in the attack. But we'll hear what happened in the stage. First of all, what are we, Lionel?
What are we?
Where are we, Lionel?
What are we?
Where are we, Lionel? What are we?
What are we? I mean, that's the existential question, isn't it? I mean, I don't think I've got time to answer that now. Where are we? We're in Angers, heading down towards the centre of France, kind of Loire Valley area, standing outside the Palais de Congrès, or the Centre de Congrès. It's not really as grand enough to be a palais. They're clearing up the end of the Tour de France here. They've taken all the barriers away. The street cleaners are working, so if you hear a bit of street cleaner noise in the background, that will be the street cleaners.
Tale of the attack, please, Lionel, without further ado. Keep it brief.
What a cracker it was. What can we say about stage 3 from Granville to Angers? It was 223.5 kilometres.
That's enough, I think. Anyways.
Almost. Raced at an average speed of 37.260 kilometres an hour. And Richard, we were speculating that we perhaps could have kept up on our folding bikes.
Well, we did a time trial this morning, didn't we, at 7:30 a.m. Around the car park in... Where were we again? Cherbourg. And you won, Lionel. I'm sorry to say. But you averaged quicker than they averaged for the first sort of 5 hours.
Yeah, well, 5 hours.
Or whatever it was.
One rider, Armindo Fonseca of Fortuneo-Vital Concept, was out in front for 141 kilometres on his own, although he wasn't exactly pressing on at any point. His maximum lead was 11 minutes at the 25 kilometre mark. He was never going to stay away because he was pedalling so slowly. It was pretty tedious stuff at times. Peter Sagan, the yellow jersey, said he'd thought about stopping for a coffee on the way, and he genuinely could have probably done that and caught back up. Anyway,
about a 3-course meal.
Yeah. With 90 kilometres to go, Thomas Voeckler, a man who looks like he's trying to lick soup off his chin, jumped across the 6-minute gap, and it took him around 7 kilometres to get.
Which says it all, doesn't it?
It does say it all, yeah. Those two were away until 8 kilometres to go when they were finally caught, put out of their misery almost. That set up a pretty exciting finale for the sprint, it has to be said, because there was a deceptively hilly finish, wasn't there? On the finish line, Andre Greipel half lifted an arm off the handlebars to celebrate, but he was pipped by Mark Cavendish by about the width of a tyre. That's Cavendish's 28th Tour stage win, drawing him level with the Badger, still 6 behind the Cannibal. So tonight, Peter Sagan is in yellow, Cavendish is in green, Jasper Stuyven is in the polka dot jersey and also polka dot shoes. I gather he painted some red dots onto his white
the
shoes.
Trek boys were in there decorating their
touch.
gear. Yeah, nice little touch.
And Julian Alaphilippe is in white. Tomorrow is another long one, the longest of the race, 237 kilometres to Limoges. Let's hope there's a bit more action, eh?
Yeah, so we'll talk a bit. We've got quite a lot to hear from in this episode in terms of interviews with various key people around Mark Cavendish. We'll hear from Rolf Aldag, his sports director, long-time sports director now at Dimension Data. Well, performance manager is his job title. We'll hear from Mark Renshaw, his lead-out man. We'll hear from Brian Holm, his former sports director, and Rod Ellingworth, his long-time coach. So lots to hear from. But it was a dull old stage, wasn't it? We'll talk a little bit about the stage, I think, in the second part. Let's pay a bit of a tribute to Cavendish, who's back, and you know it's the old gang, the crazy gang, back together again. We talked a lot about this at the start of the year, and I think most of us decided that sort of HCC reunion, it wouldn't work, that these kind of reunions never do, you know? I mean, when bands get back together, it's never quite the same, is it?
I was very surprised to see Cavendish take these 2 wins, to be honest. I mean, I thought I was ready to write him off. I thought it was going to be Kittel. He was looking thinner than ever. I thought Greipel, even Sagan was in the sprints. So to see Cav even win this stage today really says a lot about his form going into Rio as well.
What happened to Marcel Kittel?
I just don't think he has the leg power to get out that little grinder there at the end to stay with those guys. He just doesn't have the leg speed.
Funny that, because Cavendish did talk about that climb was kind of critical, and that is, you know, Kittel is a far more one-dimensional sprinter, isn't he, than Cavendish. Give him a straight bit of road with no kind of obstacles. Even, you know, a railway bridge might catch him out.
Well, Cavendish did make the point in the press conference afterwards that on a hill like that, a finish like that, momentum into the hill is really important. It's harder to accelerate, harder to jump, and of course Kittel is a lot larger. Cavendish could carry that momentum in. Greipel, to an extent, is still a big meaty guy, but not as big as Kittel. So that probably has a lot to do with it. You know, they did hit the bottom of that little drag fast, and it was about maintaining the momentum to the top rather than having to sort of kick again.
It's interesting, too, to see how the sprinters, they have less and less opportunities in these Tour de France's with these kind of uphill, punchy finales. There's no more of these straight, long flats that favor a guy like Kittel.
Let's hear from Mark Renshaw, his lead-out man. Cavendish, long-time lead-out man, reunited. Well, yeah, reunited this year. You know, Cavendish arguably has looked better than Renshaw the last few years. It's been a difficult few years for him, but you spoke to him at the finish line, didn't you?
Yeah, let's hear from Mark Renshaw now. It doesn't get much closer than that. I gather you didn't know that until you just asked the team staff here.
They told me down there, but you're never sure till you speak to someone who knows, someone I trust. So, you know, the sprint was really difficult to judge. We did a great job with only, you know, the 4 or 5 guys that we have here, and he must have only just got it because we came through the last corner, Roland, myself, Greipel, then Cavendish. So he's closed 1 length on Greipel in the last 175, which is impressive.
You were looking over your shoulder a few times in running. What were you looking for? Just to make sure he was there?
Yeah, to make sure he's there. You know, I never doubt that he won't be, but also check the situation behind. So, you know, a lot of teams went really hard from a long way out, so that made it quite difficult. You know, it's Mark Cavendish. Everyone expects him to win every race he starts. I think he had a pretty relaxed run-in with the track preparation. When he gets fire in his belly, that's probably when he's best. Roland did a really good job. He had me kind of on the limit a little bit there in the final, so I'd already done a big job up that final run-in, and I saw that Cav was behind Greipel, and there's not much better way than to put Greipel in the win first, and we made sure that we noted not to overgear on that finish, and I think Cav nailed it. Well, this is just our Cavendish card, so I think there's a few other cards with Steve Cummings, you know, Daniel Tekla-Hemenot, Eddie Bossenhagen. There's still a few finishes for him, so we've got a good mentality and a great feeling in the team, so hopefully more victories. Yeah, look, everyone now is on a high. That yellow jersey, they could have all went pear-shaped real fast if we stuffed up that first stage, but as we saw, we took the yellow, and I think now the ball's just going to keep rolling. He'd love another green jersey, so would I, in my cabinet at home, so we'll chase victories for now, and we'll see how it unfolds, and he's got other objectives after the tour, so it's also, you know, it's all a big juggle, but he'd love another green.
How does it feel to be back together? You know, is it like the HTC days?
No, not at all. You know, we're here with limited riders, and the riders we do have are great. But you know, Serge Pals, Tekla-Hemenot, Nat and Baham, we can't expect them to be pulling alongside you know, Lars Back and Greg Henderson. So it's you know, we're a little on the back foot with guys, but I think we've shown you know, great skill in utilising everyone to their best ability.
Interesting there, Mark Renshaw playing down really the comparisons with HTC, Columbia and its various guises. He made the point there that they don't have the likes of Lars Back, Greg Henderson, the real tanks that made that lead-out train so special. You know, Daniel Tekla-Hemenot not going to get involved in a sort of full-on lead-out. And yet, Dimension Data have really made the best in these 2 stage wins of what they do have. And that's really what it's all about, isn't it? You assess what your resources are and you apply those resources as best as possible. The quest for a lead-out train as good as HTC High Roads is not necessarily the answer to the question, if you see what I mean. You know, you can do it another way, and they're proving that.
Well, we'll hear a little bit more on that in the final part from Rolf Aldag. But we'll also hear from Rolf, because I spoke to Rolf Aldag a few days ago about this, and what he said was quite interesting. I think it's worth hearing in the final part. But let's hear now from Rolf Aldag, who I spoke to at the finish. And it's interesting what he says in particular about Edvald Boasson-Hagen as being key to the success. Rolf, we spoke yesterday morning about how sprinting had changed, but is Mark the same? Is this the best you've seen Mark? Is he back to the best he's been?
It's very difficult to say if he's the best ever. Mark we have seen, but for sure he's there, and for sure he's absolutely competitive, and for sure he can beat everybody. So is he better than he has been? Is he his best? I don't know. But he's ready, and he's good enough to win.
A few people said at the start of this year it was an HCC reunion here, with especially Eisel coming back, who's somebody who was seen as being quite an important influence. Has there been a single factor? Is there something that's clicked for him this year after a couple of difficult years?
No, he found new motivation for sure. He did work really, really hard over the winter. We said that yesterday. We say it's not just about like reunion with HCC riders or anything. That's past, that's history. And I think if we would just reunion under the same condition, he wouldn't be where he is right now. It's that combination of his Olympic dream, of super hard work, on changing the team to prove don't write me off, people, don't think I'm done. And then of course he feels really, really good in this environment. And it's Eisel, but it's also a guy like Boasson-Hagen, and that adds simply so much horsepower to his sprinter. Edvald Boasson-Hagen can win himself. On a sprint like today, he could easily finish top 5, and he can fix a lot of problems in that final and a lot of situations that you do not fix otherwise.
But we saw at HCC High Road, one of the things that made the team so effective was they had such complete belief in Cavendish's ability to win. And I think, that's so important, isn't it? And perhaps that was evident again today.
Yeah, sure. And I repeat myself, I'm happy to repeat myself. If we would not believe he could win here, we should leave him home. It would just be really a torture for a guy like Mark to bring him to the Tour and not be in the mix to win. That would be absolutely the moment not to ride the Tour de France. But we brought him, and with 100% commitment, with being there for him. And that's why I think it was never a doubt from our side. It was an easy build-up to the Tour. It wasn't so stressful. It wasn't huge expectations early in the season. And maybe it even helped us when people started doubting him already, to say, he's not what he is, less wins than before. And that makes Mark always better than he is.
In terms of his personality, you've known him a long time. Has he mellowed over the years, or is he exactly the same?
No, he's a complete different personality. Before that, he was only riding his bike. Now he understands the impact that he can have on his charity, the impact that he has on people around him, the responsibility that he has. I mean, in 2008, he was just riding his bike. In 2007, when we brought him to the Tour because the start was in Great Britain, and he went down 3 times in 4 days and then went home. So he wouldn't bother. It was just, full gas, straight out, all or nothing. And now, of course, he's a different personality. He's a family person. He's looking after his kids. He spends a fair amount of time for the charity, and of course, makes his life a little bit more complicated, but also very, very balanced. So once he's in a stable situation, he will not crack if somebody beats him in the next sprints. He will not crack. So that's good for us.
So that was Aldag. It was interesting. I thought he kept repeating the importance of somebody like Boasson-Hagen, who Cavendish rode with, of course, at HCC High Road. He wasn't, he was a very young and developing rider then, so he wasn't he didn't seem like a very important. I'm trying to remember if they actually rode the Tour together for HCC High Road. I think they probably did in 2011.
Yeah, I think that there was that one year they're trying to get Edvald a stage win.
Yeah,
they did ride together. Yeah,
but he wasn't a key member of the HCC train. Funny enough, when Cavendish went to Sky, I remember one stage in particular into Brive, the Cavendish's second stage win in 2012. He won that stage thanks to Edvald Boasson-Hagen, and he can do a particular job in the final parts before the lead-out man takes over, and he's just such a strong rider that he's an incredibly useful guy to have.
Yeah, and Cavendish made the point that Boasson-Hagen and Mark Renshaw really knew exactly what to do. Keep him near the front but not at the front, because when you've got few resources you can't be out there in the wind taking the whole of the pressure, and they played it really, really quite well. But let's just hear a little word from Mark Cavendish about what it means to draw level with Bernard Hinault on 28 Tour stage wins.
Kind of know I'd got it, but I had to wait for confirmation, but I'm very happy with that, yeah. To put myself in the same kind of sentence as Bernard Hinault or Eddie Merckx is something that I'm not going to do. I can't compare to the greats of cycling like that. But in terms of number of wins, whether I only won one in my career, if I win 28, if I win 50, it doesn't matter. I just come here to the Tour de France and try and do my best to succeed. So if that's my last Tour de France stage, then I can be happy with 28, So.
Eurosport, the home of cycling.
And now, Pedaler de Charme.
Thank you very much to Eurosport, who, along with Rafa, are sponsoring us at this Tour de France, and they sponsor our Pedaler de Charme, Eurosport that is. Pedaler de Charme, yesterday was Greg Henson. I was supposed to give him a t-shirt this morning, but unfortunately we had to swap cars this morning, Lionel. We had a bit of a problem with our rental car. Wasn't really doing the job very well, was it? It was, what do you compare it to?
Coke can that looked like a jazz shoe. We have been rather spoiled though, haven't we, on Grand Tours?
Oh, no.
Last 3 years, in fact, Jaguars and Maseratis to have to go back to the rental car office and take whatever they want to throw at us for 3 weeks.
Spend an hour going through the paperwork to get it. It's tedious, isn't it? But we do have really lovely carbon folding bikes from Leos, and some beautiful nano folding bikes that we're doing our own little Tour de France on every day. Anyway, I was talking about Pedaler de Charme. Greg, the reason for mentioning the car was I couldn't get to the start this morning to give the t-shirt to Greg Henderson, so have to do that tomorrow. Today's Pedaler de Charme, who is it, Lionel? There's only one contender for today, is there not?
Well, who is it? Are we seriously giving it to the man
Fonseca?
who spent 141 kilometres?
Yeah, but we're not giving it to him for that. We're giving it to him because when he was tossing bidons to the side, he made sure he gave them or threw them in the direction of small children, not to try and hit them, but to make sure that they took away a nice souvenir, which I thought was a lovely touch.
That is a lovely touch. I stand corrected.
That's the kind of thing that wins Pedaler de Charme.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Also, there was a huge injustice, wasn't there?
You have to say there is. They gave the combative prize to Tommy Voeckler, always the showboater, and not to give it to Fonseca. I mean, granted, he wasn't really going that hard. The peloton wasn't chasing. They certainly ramped up when Voeckler jumped across. I mean, I don't think Voeckler's going to get any gifts from the peloton these days.
Well, a little bird tells me that the jury on the Competitivity Award panel didn't want to give an award. They only did it because obviously there's a sponsor involved and because they didn't feel that either of the two riders really deserved it. I mean, Voeckler, if it was World Gurning Championships, then I'd understand. He'd definitely win that.
I did enjoy Dimension Data. Team Dimension Data tweeted about an update on the stage, and they just, to represent Voeckler, they just had a little emoji for a tongue. Just a tongue. That was it. But it was interesting, wasn't it, what Sagan said after the stage about... He was asked why the stage was so slow, and he said, well, there was only one guy in front and he was riding really slow, therefore we rode very slow. This is something that Joe Dombrowski spoke about a couple of weeks ago when we did an event in London about the way the breakaway works in a World Tour race at this sort of level. It's also controlled. There really is no point in busting a gut in a breakaway because the peloton will just keep you where they want you, really, pretty much.
Yeah, if you press on in the break, the bunch will press on. If you ease off, the bunch will ease off, and that relationship works both ways. If the bunch eases off and you press on, then they'll speed up. I mean, it's like the length of elastic is kind of decided on the day whether that elastic's going to be 10 minutes or 6 minutes or 4 minutes, depending on the course and the weather conditions, who wants to chase and so on, and it's changing all of the time. But the idea that if Fonseca had put his head down and hammered it, he might have had a better chance because the bunch were taking a day off is a bit of a misnomer.
The peloton decides, and if the breakaway rides at 42 kilometres an hour, the peloton will ride at such a speed to keep them within catchable distance. If they ride at 38 kilometres an hour, they will adjust their speed accordingly.
But how surprising was it to see only one guy in a breakaway at the Tour de France? Even though, granted, a couple hard days in Normandy, we got really hard tour ahead of us, but I was shocked to see only one guy out there. I mean, this is an opportunity for all these smaller teams to get their guys out in the breakaways, chance to try to win a stage. I mean, everyone knew it was going to be a sprint, but there's all this commercial interest. It's prime time in France. I couldn't believe there's only one guy in the breakaway today.
I spoke to Marc Sergent, the Lotto-Soudal sports director, and I kind of made a bit of a joke and said, this is a bit like a stage of the Tour de France from the 1980s when, the break goes and everyone kind of rolls along and then has a fast flurry at the end. And I asked him why he thought that was, and he just said it's been an intense couple of days in Normandy. Roads are tight, lots of road furniture, twisty, turny, little bit of drizzle in the air, few crashes, and they've got another long day into Limoges tomorrow, so back-to-back long days. They've chosen to take one of them easier than the other. It's a little bit lumpier tomorrow.
It was almost like the Champs-Elysees stage there. Guys chatting, joking, drinking some champagne with Sagan.
It's unusual to see it so early in the race.
Well, it is. I mean, I was looking back and thinking back. In 2009, you probably remember the stage to Etixx-Quick, which is not that far from here, when the ASO organisers decided they were going to take the riders' radios away for the day to see whether it provoked more interesting racing, and there was a kind of unofficial go slow, wasn't there, and they just pootled along all day. Funnily enough, Cavendish won that day as well.
Just final word on Sagan. I spoke to his press officer Pierre from Tinkoff earlier, and I asked him about, we had Francois Thomas on last night stating categorically that Sagan definitely knew he'd won Sunday's stage, that it was, to quote Francois, bullshit, that he didn't know that it was sprinting for the win. And Pierre swore blind that he genuinely didn't know, and that after he crossed the line, he was still in the dark about whether he'd won or not.
I have to say I'm also disappointed in Sagan today. Come on, guys, expecting him to have dyeing his hair yellow, painting his fingernails yellow, dyeing his skin yellow. I mean, come on, what's up with Sagan?
Some kind of huge yellow tattoo. That was
we were watching. We sat in the little interview truck with Sagan and Cavendish, didn't we? At the end, Lionel, and we were just sort of studying them because they're very different and yet the same in a funny sort of way. Yeah,
body language was very similar. I mean, Sagan's hair is extraordinary. I mean, it really is. It is a mane, without sort of joking about it. It tumbles down under his cap. But he had the sort of demeanour of a kid who just couldn't work out why he's in school. He's quite fidgety.
Very fidgety.
His answers are quite funny and quite sort of sardonic, I guess. I mean, at one point, somebody asked him why it had gone slow today, and he said something like, "The bicycle has always been the same." I mean, it was sort of...
It's Eric Cantona, isn't he?
Almost. And then Cavendish came in, and he looked like a kid who'd been made to do detention.
Yeah, Cavendish is just a remarkable man, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, Cavendish he's been one of these characters that I know, especially for the British. I mean, such a superstar. People don't realize how big Cavendish is back in the UK. I remember when the year he crashed in 2014. Harrogate.
I love it. Yeah, hey, finally, Harrogate.
Yeah. What a huge disappointment that was. And then Sagan he's just a freak of nature, isn't he? I mean, he's like this, this born to ride a bike. Just his genes, his ooze, cycling.
He's got massive hands as well. You notice when you're sitting close quarters, very big hands, which a lot of
Donald Trump.
A lot of good riders have very big hands. Greg LeMond has very big hands. So does Bernard Hinault. But it was something that I sort of thought about after even the first stage. We were all sort of talking about Cavendish and his win over Kittel, but what kind of went unnoticed was how close Sagan came to beating the two fastest sprinters in the world. And, having led it out effectively. And you just thought, this guy is phenomenal. To do that, and then on the next day, when Kittel and Cavendish are way out the back, to win the stage. I mean, again, you talk about superstars. All the stages of this year's tour have been won by Cavendish and Sagan. And they are superstars. They are destined to be considered all-time greats.
Oh, for sure. It came up during the press conference today. Does he feel like a legend now that he's in the yellow jersey after being the world champion? And he goes, "No, I'm still bike racing. I'll think about it later." He's a kid. He is a kid.
You are listening to the Cycling Podcast in association with Rafa. Whoever you are, wherever you ride, whatever the reason, Rafa exists to improve your ride. With the finest kit, inspiring stories, and vibrant clubhouses and communities all over the world. See rafa.cc for more information.
Yes, thank you very much to Rafa, who are sponsoring us at the Tour de France. And do remember that if you go to rafa.cc and click on More Than a Race, you will find a treasure trove of stories, different themed stories around this year's tour, a different one every day, and there's some really good stuff there. And we were talking, Lionel, because we watched the finish actually in a little bar by the Dimension Data bus, because we were waiting there for some people. And as we were watching the closing sort of 20 kilometres or so, we were watching the way that Team Sky were riding off to the side, but with all 9 riders, and you've got Mikel Nievi, Sergio Henao sitting there taking their turn at the front, and we just kind of wondered I wondered really whether that was a sensible way to be riding. Okay, they weren't going flat out, but it's a long race. Those guys will be very important in the third week. They're kind of using their climbers already in a way. They're giving them a job which will put a bit of physical stress on them, but a bit of mental stress as well, to be at the front and just holding that place in the line. They're obviously trying to go, ride to the side of the bunch, keep Froome out of danger, but they're upsetting other teams, aren't they? And Sagan kind of hinted at that in his press conference, that the GC teams being up there, Cavendish mentioned it too, is making everything a little bit more dangerous.
Well, yeah, Peter Sagan said something in the press yesterday, and Mark Cavendish was very insightful and eloquent about it, explaining that, a few years ago, the idea was to try and keep out of trouble until the 3 kilometre mark, because with 3 kilometres to go, if you suffer a crash or mechanical, you get the same time as the group you were with. So there's a kind of virtual finish line for the GC riders, 3k to go. But that's almost not being taken as the sort of the finish point that it is. And everybody, the point Mark Cavendish made was that some GC riders are actually trying to get right to the front rather than coasting in at the back knowing that they're safe, but get right to the front, hoping that there might be splits perhaps, and there might be a little gap in the peloton that's 12, 13 seconds, because the time gaps are taken from the first rider of one group to the first rider of the next group, not from the back of one group and the front of the next. So a gap that looks like maybe, 20 metres on the road could in fact be 12 seconds, 9 seconds.
It's a very effective way to gain time if you can initiate a split.
If you can initiate a split, or if something happens. And that is changing the dynamic of the race, because how many GC riders are there in the first week? Well, pretty much there's a dozen, isn't there? And so it is making it quite hectic, quite dangerous. And Sky are definitely trying to get off to one side. I'm not sure it's terribly effective, but if Chris Froome feels more comfortable that way, then they wouldn't be doing it.
It's just quite strange to see the whole team, because we saw it in 2012 with Christian Knies had that role with Bradley Wiggins as a sort of bodyguard, and they rode off to the side, but it was one rider. Maybe they don't have a Knies type rider, although Stannard maybe could do a job like that.
I think it's also Team Sky's way of sending a signal to Quintana. I think they're trying to muscle Quintana, kind of intimidate him a little bit in this first 7 days into the Pyrenees. And the master of that play is Froome. Even remember at the Dauphiné this year, stage 4, kind of a lumpy little sprint finish, Froome was in that front group, and one or two riders pulled off, created that gap, and Contador lost 9 seconds. And the Dauphiné was only decided by 12 seconds, I think, at the end of the day. And I think Team Sky and Froome plays that card a lot in these stages.
What about BMC? Because at the time that they came to the overhead shot and we saw Sky on the right-hand side of the road, you looked a bit further down the peloton and there was a knot of red and black jerseys, BMC almost in a little cluster. They're taking a completely different approach.
Yeah, I think they're just trying to stay out of the trouble at the front or the back. Where is that risk? And again, with these kind of lumpy finishes, it's not just a straight, flat finish to the line. There are splits, and that just kind of heightens the tension. Having these GC guys don't want to lose those 9 seconds.
Hey, Andy, it's been a tricky couple of days. Bad weather, crashes. You're our sort of Spanish-speaking expert. You wrote an excellent piece on Nairo Quintana on VeloNews. I think you'll find that VeloNews last week, a sort of long feature. He'll be delighted, will he not? He's level on time. He's 6th overall, I think. Froome's up to 4th, but he's level on time with Froome after these 3 quite tricky stages.
That is their mission, is to chaperone Nairo to the Pyrenees on Saturday, and then let him take over. If they can get Nairo to the Pyrenees for Movistar, it's a victory. They have Nairo clamped down right now. He has very little access to the media right now. He has not been spending a lot of time talking to the media, especially considering that half the Colombian press corps just love to talk to Nairo every day. He's had just staying very focused, just not being distracted by anything right now, and they just want to get Nairo to that first climbing stage.
Shall we go back to Mark Cavendish to close out this episode, because we feel that, he said tonight this might be his last stage win in the Tour de France. We don't know that. He's got other opportunities here, but let's talk a little bit more about Cavendish, or hear a little bit more about Cavendish from people who know him well. You had a chat with Rod Ellingworth and Brian Holm, I think, the other day about him, didn't you, Lionel?
I did, yeah. Two of the people who know him best. Rod Ellingworth, of course, really went into bat for Mark Cavendish, along with John Herity, when the British Cycling Academy were really on the fence about whether to take him on, whether his numbers merited a place on the academy. Ellingworth and Herity felt that he had the heart of a bike racer. And Brian Holm, of course, his very good friend and sports director at Etixx-Quick Step, and before that HTC High Road. And Richard, did you speak to Rolf Aldag?
Yeah, well, let's hear from Rod Ellingworth and Brian Holm, and then we'll hear from Rolf Aldag, who was talking when I spoke to him yesterday. So it was after Cavendish's first stage win. He's at Dimension Data now, of course. Rolf Aldag, we heard from him earlier, but here he was just talking about how sprinting has changed, even in the last decade, since HTC High Road were so dominant.
Rod, what was your reaction to Mark Cavendish winning the yellow jersey? At long last, I guess.
Yeah, no, really good, wasn't it? I mean, I just think for the sprinters, there's only so many opportunities, isn't there? And they, it's hard to take them opportunities sometimes, and so, as you can see in that sprint yesterday, anything can happen, can't it? Which didn't, I don't think had anything to do with bike racing, wasn't it? Really, that they fell, but brilliant for Cav. I mean, I'm really happy for him, and I think for British cycling and recent sort of things that are going off, I think it's really good news. I just think in general for him, he's worked hard for it. I think and he's consistently there. I think there's obviously other sprinters who are in a real straight line quicker than Cav at times, but I think he's proved that he's sort of tactically one of the best sprinters out there still. The way he waited and the way he sort of knew the wind had changed and become headwind, it was brilliant.
He's had 26 stage wins before yesterday. It's not even like he's been unlucky to miss out on the yellow jersey. The opportunity's not really presented itself to him. I suppose Harrogate was the big chance, wasn't it?
There's two, I think, which stand to my mind. Harrogate was one where he crashed, and two was Corsica, where they had his whole team, didn't he? If you remember, Tony Martin really fell heavy there. So I think both times where it's been right there for him, incidents have happened. So it's sort of one of them, isn't it? But I think that's the game they're in, and they understand that, don't they? That's what makes cycling exciting, isn't it? I bet a lot of people sat on the settee at home watching that, ready for this big sprint. So it was an exciting finish for everybody, I think.
What was your reaction? Because you've known him since he was a teenager. I mean, where were you watching, and what did you feel when he got over the line first?
Well, I mean, I managed to get, because I did the recons ahead, so I got back only with 7k to go, so I didn't see it till right at the final, and then so really happy, and I just sent him a little text to say well done, and be proud to see him in the yellow jersey.
Brian, you know Mark Cavendish better than a lot of people. What was your reaction yesterday to him finally getting the yellow jersey?
You think that's quite typical Cav, isn't it? I mean, he didn't do too much lately, but I mean, we've been there before, like everybody always discuss Cav, as long as I can remember, can he do it, can't, if it's over, and then as he's always popping up, I mean, and honestly, I think most agree nobody really deserved that yellow jersey. It's just silly he didn't have that yellow jersey before. I don't know, I think he won more than 25 stages, so I think I was on the right spot today, the yellow jersey.
Of course, you had conflicting emotions, I guess, because your man Marcel Kittel was, he was coming up hard but wasn't able to get past Cav on the line. What were your emotions watching on the TV?
No, to be honest, I mean, of course, like Cav is my little stepson, and I love him, but we're here for winning, yes, so when we beaten, I think I'm disappointed, but we have to beat. It's a professional cycling team, but of course, thinking twice about it, like when it's Cav, seeing him with the yellow jersey, of course, I mean, but that's the whole sport. I think we have to learn to be happy with somebody's winning also, but we have to be disappointed when we're beaten also, of course. I wished from the start that Cav would win a stage here, but of course not when he was beating us. But that's part of cycling, isn't it? We have to live with it. So of course I was disappointed. I didn't really know if it was Cav or somebody else. We just disappointed. Was Sagan or Granville, Christophe beating us? You're always disappointed. But it take a few hours, and then seeing the pictures of Cav, with the yellow, you start to saying, oh my dear, he really does deserve that jersey if somebody do it. So it was really nice for him to see, and the team also.
What did they do right, or what did Mark and Dimension Data do right that perhaps he didn't get right yesterday?
From my point of view, it was a little bit chaotic, like we saw it. I think nobody really what they did right was probably they didn't do too much yesterday. I mean, they didn't really chase, they didn't really do anything. We know Bernie Eisel, we know Renshaw, they're like masterminding their job, aren't they? And they had what exactly they did the last 2 kilometers, I couldn't follow on the television. What I could see from the car out front, of course, our guys that didn't focus on Cav or Sagan or Granville, and but the winner is always right there. So they did the best job yesterday. So congrats.
Does this take you back to the HCC High Road days?
No, not really. It's a lot more sweating. It's a lot more freestyling now than it was there, because there was, let's say, it felt like we were the only plan who takes, only team who had a plan for sprinting and who took it really, really serious. It was a dedicated lead out with really people who had no other job than you go to 900, you go to 400, you go to there. And you just execute it and win. And now it is different. The competition really, really, really is a lot harder. With teams like Etixx investing into lead out, investing into sprinting, investing into the surrounding, into the support, having really good people in the cars with Tom Steers, green jersey winner, multiple stage winner of the Tour de France himself, and that makes it tougher and tougher, which makes that win yesterday even more value than the early stage wins, when you feel like, okay, if nobody wants to, we're more than happy to take it on. And we keep on winning, but then people learn to say, this is maybe something we should look into, and it has a big value, and you create big stars by sprint finishes, and it makes it harder, and that's why I think, especially now with going with the yellow jersey, that was very special.
So that was Rod Ellingworth, Brian Holm and Rolf Aldag. Rod, Brian and Rolf, it's like a 1970s prog rock trio. I don't know. Anyway.
I think they'd be quite flattered by that. Certainly Brian Holm, maybe.
Yeah.
He likes his music, doesn't he? Not sure about prog rock, but...
Rod on bass, and I think Rolf would be the drummer.
Yeah, Rolf on drums for sure.
Brian Holm, frontman, for sure.
Axeman, frontman, keyboards.
Everything, yeah.
Spiked hair.
Oh, excellent.
Platform boots.
We should give a little plug to our first Kilometre Zero went out Monday, and that's our morning show Monday to Friday. It's a short, 10 to 20 minute long episode looking at some aspect of the tour. First one tells a story of a sort of day in the life of a journalist. It features Andy Hood here, among other people covering the race. And our second Kilometre Zero will be released on Tuesday, and it's a little look at German cycling. The Grand Départ is happening next year in Düsseldorf. It has an interview with Marcel Kittel about the state of German cycling and what he's done to try and restore the reputation of the sport in his home country. So we kind of half hoped that Marcel Kittel would win today to give that a bit more oomph, didn't we, Lionel? But it wasn't to be.
You can't predict the Tour de France. Well, you can, but you can't rely on being right.
Speculation.
Don't the winners always seem so obvious after the stage?
They
especially
do,
for the office betting pools, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so we should wrap things up for today. Thank you very much, Andy. You'll be joining us again, especially maybe as we get to the Pyrenees, an area you know very well with your Spanish connections, where you live as well, of course.
Yeah, up there in northern Spain. Looking forward to getting to some better weather and maybe some even better food. We'll have a few days there in Spain and Andorra. Looking forward to that.
Thank you very much, Andy, and thank you, Lionel.
Thank you, Richard.